Like bass seems like an instrument that in my head, like I would only ever play it if it was like to be in a band. Like if it was like, oh, like I'd rather play guitar, but like I'll play bass if you need a bass player, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of weird. Like I could definitely listen to just like solo bass. I just really like deeper sounds, which is kind of weird because I have a very deep voice as well.
You do, yeah, you definitely do. Not what I expected when we hopped on the call. Not that
no one expects it. It's so weird. Everyone expects me, I think, to like, oh hi guys.
Well, especially after talking to Lewmoth. Hey everybody, Kevin here with Pursuing Pixels, and we're joined again this week by our pal Dev Dwarf. How's it going tonight, Dev Dwarf?
What's poppin'?
Nice. Thanks again for joining us for a second week in a row, although we're just recording this back-to-back after we just got done chatting about some games. But we figured now that you got to know Dev Dwarf a little bit, we're just going to dig in and talk about some of their stuff. And again, we've done some of that on our own on the podcast, but, you know, get a little bit behind the scene, a little peek behind the curtain, if you will, and their like design philosophy and whatnot. And again, we've if you're not familiar with their games, or if this happens to be the first time you're listening to the podcast, probably at least where I discovered your stuff was through the game Lianthus, which is kind of like a top-down, spooky, not dungeon crawler, but sorta ish. I don't know, like, you know, some action
it's a bit of a
Strand
type game.
What's that?
It's a bit of a Strand type game.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it feels very stream of consciousness when you're playing it. Like it's just kind of like, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. But it's like a really immersive, and it's got that. I know you're kind of, I don't know if it's overstepping a little to say you're known for your sprite stacking technique, but I know you've like released a few kind of like tutorial videos on that, and a few like assets and stuff on itch.io, where it's like that seems like where you maybe started working on that at first, that process, or where you started dabbling and experimenting with that?
Yeah, actually, when I started making Lianthus, it was spring last year, I think, or yeah, it would have been last year, and I was actually working on a rhythm game with Lewmoth.
Nice.
But I was just having a lot of problems like implementing it. So I'm like, okay, I want to go do something like just fun to like clear my mind. So I made this little like drawing, very like low color palette of like a weird skeleton and like a witch and like a tree. And I'm like, hey, this is kind of cool. I kind of like it. And I'm like, okay, well, I wanted to try sprite stacking because like ages ago, like 4 years ago, I was working on this like racing game with someone that was sprite stacking, and that game never got finished or anything, or like even posted anywhere. But I always liked like kind of the workflow for sprite stacking because it lets me be very lazy. Or at least I thought so. I learned that's,
I was going to say, interesting.
So not true.
Yeah.
That's so not true, but I thought it was true. And so I'm like, oh, okay, making this Lianthus thing will probably be easier than finishing the rhythm game. So we should just go full force on that.
Right. And you tag team that one with Lewmoth as well, right? Because I know you two are kind of like go by Noisy Bug. That's like whenever you two work on something together? Is that correct to assume that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely how I'd describe it. We both just kind of wanted like a name to put our stuff under, and we've been working on projects like off and on for like 3 years, so it just felt kind of right to like have like a way to group it all together.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Especially like I always really like, again, we talked a little bit about, and you've worked on games with these two as well, but Matt Ugg and Connor Grail, they definitely are like just kind of almost always. I think there's a couple times that Matt's had somebody else work on the tunes, but like just know, like you just always know you're in for a treat with the tunes. And then same thing with you and Lewmoth. Most of the time it's like, and Lewmoth is another just top notch composer. He was actually the first interview we've ever had on the podcast was with Lewmoth. So I'll link that in the episode description as well. But yeah, just again, like found your games through Lianthus, and then as I was kind of like exploring through itch.io, like, you know, I've that seemed kind of like more of like a, for lack of a better term, Lianthus, that is like kind of like a commercial or a, full release game, if you will, even though it's a shorter, bite-sized thing. But then
a full release. Yeah,
as you have other stuff like Control Co., which we talked about with Lewmoth a little bit, which was a game jam project, or Fear of Gears as well. Two game jam projects that you kind of collaborated with others, and even with Self, you're kind of collaborating with Matt on the game design and doing more of the coding, I think, although I'm sure you're both kind of working on the level design or tweaking things together, but like you're kind of more focused on the coding, or am I misspeaking there?
Not necessarily, but I mean, I can get in more, I guess, to how he made Self. One thing real quick for Lianthus, actually my friend Noel helped with the art for the bosses, and I just want to give a shout out for that, because the game would be much worse with how the bosses originally looked. He like played an early version of it and was just like, this is cool, I really like what you've got going on here, let me make the art for the bosses. And I'm like, sounds good.
All right, that's I will second
shout
that.
out to Nolnad on Twitter.
Yeah, I will second
Amazing
that, because
artist.
That first battle with like the werewolf kind of thing is one of the coolest boss battles, and then the final boss battle, I won't say anything about it, but like it's such a cool, both mechanically and stylistically, it's just really awesome. So yeah, I second that shout out. Those boss battles are really, really cool in that game, and kind of a little bit unexpected, because you're sort of at times you're kind of like leisurely just kind of strolling and exploring around, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, I gotta kill this thing.
Yeah, I had like I definitely wouldn't say Lianthus is for everyone, because I purposely made it a game like a lot of people wouldn't like, and I was very attached to the idea of doing that. Like I wanted it to just be, you're just completely lost and not really like help you at all with that. There's no like map, hints are really vague and like hard to understand in a way.
Yeah.
And then also like there's just a lot of unexpected stuff that happens. But yeah, that's just kind of what I was going for. Like that's just how I wanted to do it. And so I did it.
Yeah, I really enjoy that sense of like especially with like the game is very, it's very much about the environment too, and I feel like just that sense of being lost in the environment a little bit and not knowing what's going on, or even necessarily what you're supposed to be doing, that adds to that quality, I think, where it makes you want to poke around at the edges and like figure out what to do, because we do get so used to games these days just kind of holding your hand through the process. Not every game nowadays, but it's just, it can like just, the tutorial is like, I can't tell you how many games I don't even finish the tutorial because I'm like, I just can't. I can't have you telling me how to play this game for 20 minutes like I've never touched a controller before. I get it to some degree, but it can be a little bit frustrating. So I do like when a game doesn't hold your hand and takes the opposite approach.
Definitely. Yeah, I've never been into like very long kind of, I guess I'd call them like formal tutorials.
Yeah.
Just because I hate school and like being taught things. So I've like, it's just not fun, so make the game not that.
Yeah, and learn. Let me learn hands on. Don't like the thing I hate the most, more than anything, is where to like, let's say it's like a thing that's trying to teach you about like a timing button press, like or a button press that you need to put in at a certain timing. It's like, this is how you parry this attack, but it's like it'll actually freeze the game and then tell you to press that button. It's like, well, I'm not actually learning the timing if you're just going to freeze the game during the time I'm supposed to press the button. So it can be super frustrating. It can almost make it, you get less of a handle of the controls, I think, because you're always thinking about, am I doing it right or wrong if I'm told how to do it right, if that makes sense. But how do you feel like, so going from something, I know you worked with Lewmoth on Lianthus as far as like him doing the soundtrack, and I think he does the sound design as well, if I'm not mistaken. But how does it feel? Actually,
I did all the sound.
Oh, really? Sound effects, that's super rad. That's awesome.
I usually do all the sound effects. Lewmoth really hates doing that.
Interesting.
I always try and talk him into doing that more, especially for like other people. But I've always like really liked making the sound for my games.
What so how do you,
my favorite parts?
to go on a tangent, then how do you go about that? Like, do you make them by hand, or is it like, are you finding like sound effects libraries that you're downloading from and manipulating the audio, or do you have an audio background at all?
Yeah, I definitely don't have an audio background, and I'm definitely like not great at any of that. But I use like sample packs of sounds that I've found. I use like freesound.com. I do just a lot of like theft and break a lot of copyright law while I'm doing all of that. And also like I'll just make sounds, like just make noises or like hit things together.
Yeah, I mean, you can do
one of the sounds in Lianthus. I think like the sound effect for like hitting things. I actually like got that because there was this weird plant in my yard where I'd like, I don't know. I just got into the habit of like smacking it and it made a weird sound. So I just went outside and like did that.
That's awesome. That is really, like, I took a lot of audio classes, like audio for film classes in particular when I was in school. And like, it was really interesting to hear like, okay, yeah, you like when you're watching this movie, like, yeah, you just see like the truck engine revving or whatever, but really there's like actually like a lion roaring in the background to like underneath it. So like to give it a little more, make it sound more intimidating. It just, you can do so much crazy stuff with audio.
Definitely.
And that's really cool. That's very interesting. And I think like it shows like that you're the one putting that touch on it. Not to say that Lewmoth or somebody else working on the sound design wouldn't be able to do that, but I don't know. I feel like you really, especially in Lianthus, like that game really sets a mood, and the sound effects are certainly part of it. But even with one of your other games, Few-R DVD, which is that one just you, or is that a Lewmoth and is that a Noisy Bug production as well?
Well, we got to disambiguate there because there's a new one.
That's right. That's right.
But for the original one, that was a jam. I actually did that. This was like a horrible idea. I don't recommend it. But I released Lianthus, then immediately that day did a game jam.
Jesus Christ.
And I didn't sleep at all. I just stayed up the whole 48 hours and did the game jam.
Wow.
I made this really weird, horrifying game. And yeah, I did it all by myself.
So you did all the sound on that one and everything? Because I love the soundscape on that game. It's like, it's such a weird game. Even the name, I'm like, what the hell does this mean? DJ just pointed out to me the other day. He's like, oh, I love how that's just like an anagram of his name. And I was like, oh, how did I not catch that?
There's two types of people. The ones that like see that immediately, and everyone else is just like, how did you come up with that crazy name?
Exactly. Well, that's how you get DJ beating Dungeon Death Ball on the first try, and me sitting here like 3 hours later, like, how do you play this game? But yeah, he's just got that brain, I guess. But I was curious to like where you have games like Lianthus and Few-R DVD that you're kind of like pretty much doing all of the game design, I would imagine. Maybe you're bouncing ideas off of friends and on Twitter.
One thing I'd actually say about that, you might not expect it, but with pretty much most of the Noisy Bug games, they're actually like Lewmoth's idea.
Really? He didn't mention that at all.
Very good at game design. I know he never talks about this.
Like the only thing he mentioned. Go ahead.
Like except Few-R, because like I did that during a jam. He didn't work on it. I like towards the end of the jam, I'm like, hey, do you want to make music for this? And he like, I showed him a gameplay video, and he's like, why do you need music for this?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
But besides that, like, I think pretty much all of the games that we've done together have been his idea, or like sometimes like I had like a basic idea, like I had the basic idea for Lianthus, but he actually came up with the like, oh, we should have like this like dark world and you're like traveling between them. That's like his idea.
Wow. Yeah, completely. He was very like he did not take hardly any credit for that. I mean, he did mention like that he sometimes, I remember him talking about using a Little Big Planet as like a game design kind of tool. The games he makes in Little Big Planet, like, I don't know, they put most like indie developers back in their seat in terms of the quality, but then it's like, it's on Little Big Planet, like what the fuck? It's crazy. But no, that's so cool. And that's really cool to like, well, I guess my question was going to be going from like, is with the Noisy Bug stuff, you're definitely more involved with the game design. And then again, now I'm worried that I'm going to be speaking out of turn here as well. But like with Self, where you were working with Matt Ugg and Connor Grail, at least from me having played a ton of Matt's games in the past, like this one felt a lot more like a Matt game to me than a Dev Dwarf game, having just being like a 2D platformer. Yeah, and having the Connor Grail tunes and everything, it just kind of felt that way to me. And I even remember mentioning to you, I was like, "Oh, I love those matte spikes," and you're like, "Actually, I did those spikes." So, I could very well be speaking out of turn, but I got the impression that it was more.
Let me flip your whole world around on that again.
Lay it on me.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, Self. We were originally doing that for Global Game Jam, and actually, I was busy because all the best game jams, for whatever reason, always decide to just do them right in the middle of like the college semester. So I was busy with like classes for most of the day, and so I logged on like that night, and Matt had actually like already made the game.
Jeez, okay.
And because he had like the whole idea for it, and it was kind of based on like an earlier idea he had, but he hadn't been happy with, and so he came up with this mechanic. I think there's like, if you dig through his Twitter, whoever's listening to this, go deep dive on his Twitter.
Hey, he doesn't post that often,
this, like,
so you don't have to. You probably won't have to scroll that far. He barely ever posts on Twitter. So.
But yeah, like the design was like kind of there, but what I told him, I don't know, we had this like weird interaction because I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And then I didn't message him for like 4 hours. And then I'm like, okay, I recoded the entire game from scratch. And I sent it to him, but he really liked it. So then we just decided I was just going to do the code.
Okay.
For all of it.
And is that how it's pretty much worked? Like, has he done all, with a grain of salt? I'm sure you guys are all bouncing ideas off each other, but is he pretty much doing the game design and you're working on the coding and then maybe a little bit of the art and brainstorming and stuff, and Connor's doing the tunes?
It was really interesting process. I'm really excited to actually work on Self more, which we will at some point.
Yeah, I'm super excited. When we first, Randall and I were the only ones on the episode where we just gushed about this game, and like, you all have made like a few posts since like the initial release that have teased a few new ideas and some new visual stuff and just all sorts of little teases where it's like, oh man, and even just playing the game, it's like, a pretty bite-sized, like almost like a proof of concept demo, kind of like, hey, here's a little taste of what's going on here. And the polish level is like off the charts. I mean, it's very, very polished.
It's
very polished. I mean, it's above. I mean, I've bought game, like this is just a game that you can otherwise just like if you're just scrolling on itch.io, it's a browser-based game. I mean, you can download it too, but like, this is way more polished than many of the games I own on my consoles, like hands down.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's saying something, because platforming is tough. 2D platforming, especially when it comes to precision platforming, is not easy to get right. And from the games I've played of yours, you haven't done a ton of that in the past, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
you're gonna blow my mind all night tonight.
Yeah. Actually, like all I made for my first 2 years of game development were like really shitty platformers. So I've done quite a lot of that, but I stopped doing it because of how shitty they were.
And what was shitty about them?
Just horrible ideas. I'm like a horrible game idea person.
So it's all about Lewmoth and Matt. Everybody else has got the ideas.
I just like, please let me code a game.
You just have the code.
I need to like put my name on something. But Matt definitely like came up with the main design for Self. I think like the part that I could definitely take a bit of credit for designing though is we had this kind of interesting workflow that I was a big fan of, where because when you're making a game, like you might hear this from other game developers, for a lot of people there's kind of two parts, like, or at least people maybe that are more focused on the code side. Like a lot of people make game systems and game mechanics and kind of this stuff that like could be a game, and like they spend a lot of time doing that and getting that right.
Okay.
And then on the other end, eventually you have to like, all right, well now I need to make like the levels, and I need to, put the story together and kind of make it like
like package it up.
I have
almost.
the gameplay, but now I have to package up. Now I have to like take all those gameplay mechanics I made to their fullest extent and like, show like how those systems can be used. And the interesting thing about Self is I just did the first part. Like I just made the platforming feel really good. I made like a lot of different mechanics, a lot of mechanics that actually didn't make it to the demo cut, just because we were still just not happy. We iterated a lot on the levels.
Yeah, or figuring out how you want to incorporate new mechanics into level design. Like once you have a new mechanic, you have to figure out how to build levels around that mechanic, I'm sure. So
well, and especially one thing that Matt was very critical about, because he's also very good at it, is teaching mechanics and the pacing of that, which is something that's extremely hard to get right and a very big skill of his.
Oh, he's amazing at it. Like a lot of his games are very, very short, but the entire game almost feels like
so well.
Yeah, like the whole game almost feels like a tutorial. Like by the time you finish it, you're like, I've mastered all of the mechanics throughout this experience, and like
it's very cool.
And they never overstay their welcome. I mean, to be honest, most of the time I'm like, I wish there was more, but like at the same time, that's the best way to leave people feeling like instead of being like, I have to slog through the last hour of this game. It's like, why don't I just play this 10 or 15 minute game? And if I like it that much, I'll just play it again. I mean, there are definitely times where, like, again, with Self, I'm like, I really, really am hoping and waiting for more from that one. But even with like, I
think there's people with like a solid 100 hours or more in Self, to be honest.
Yeah, the speedrunning community went nuts on that one. And our buddy Morcalb just took the top slot. But Zed Squadron, who is the designer and developer of Sprout, was...
I had to talk to him like, man, I don't want to stop your game development hobby by you being the main speedrunner for my game.
Exactly, yeah, because I'm really excited for that new game he's working on, the freezer action. I forget what it's called exactly, but I'm really excited. It looks so different from Sprout.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I will say about that, I have gotten to play a demo. It is, like you were talking about, I think on the last episode, or maybe just on our in-between discussion about how Matt can like make levels of Self look easy. Yeah. With that game that Zed Squadron's doing, he's like an actual savant at solving that kind of problem. And I'm not like, I'm 100% serious about that. It's wild. He got like literally 100 times further than anyone else can on that kind of thing. It's crazy.
Yeah, he's nuts.
Yeah.
And a great game designer too. Yeah, I'm a huge Sprout fan. Again, I mean, I could play precision platformers all day.
Definitely.
And that's another one that kind of does a perfect job of like each zone kind of teaches you, hey, here's the new mechanic, and explores it to its fullest within those like 20 levels or whatever.
That's great as well.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, but with Self, like I just did that first part of the development. I just made the systems, and I really actually I spoke to Matt like, I'm just gonna make like this toy box for you to like put stuff together however you want to. And so he really got to focus on just like building the levels and kind of crafting that side of the experience, and all the art and stuff was his prerogative as well.
Yeah, very except for the spikes. But I'm sure you had to do it to his protocol or whatever. Like, hey, they still got to look like Matt spikes.
Yeah, they look so much like his art style.
They really do. They like I said, I totally complimented him on them mistakenly. But yeah, it seems like it would be really exciting to like get to experience the development end from all different angles. Like, I'm kind of surprised that you're coming at it more from like the coding perspective of just like, hey, I just want to work on these mechanics, because it does seem like it almost like Self definitely felt like it was the first time. I shouldn't say the first time, but like it definitely felt like Matt was like, hey, I'm going for like the full thing, because I'd actually talked to Connor before where he had said like, man, I'm kind of pestering Matt to like make a bigger project where it's like, I don't need to just make like one song for it kind of thing. Like I want to, let's make a bigger deal. And it felt like Self almost felt like, hey, this almost like, because he didn't have to do the whole thing, it let him kind of like explore the mechanics a little bit more, as opposed to just fleshing them out and really tightening up that small focused set of mechanics.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad I'm glad you see it that way, because that's definitely, like, I kind of saw it that way, because I'm really just like a big fan of Matt's games. Kind of the way we got started is I had just been like messaging him how much I liked his games. For like some of the previous game jams, and like Melt was made for a game jam and stuff, and so yeah, we just decided to make one together. And I'm like, I definitely consider myself like mainly a programmer, like for games. Like I definitely recommend, if you're a game developer, get really good at one thing, because then you can work with other people and be like a valuable like helper for them. And I'm very good at programming, so I'm able to help people with that.
Yeah, and again, that like, to make a 2D platformer that feels really tight and responsive, and for that matter, even has controller support. You know, I hardly ever see that.
I made sure to throw the controller support in. Actually, from like the videos I've watched of you playing his game, his other games that don't have controller support, I'm like, all right, I got to make this game.
And Matt's games, of all games, they need controller support.
They're platformers.
I don't want to say they need it, because to each their own. Like,
I'm gonna make him like a reusable like controller support thing that you can just plop in, I think.
I know, every time I see one of his new games, I'm like, I got to figure this out. Except, thankfully, a lot of times, like with his latest game, Mole, I'm just like, well, it's just one button, spacebar. Like, I can play that with a keyboard. It's more just, when I have to use, it's more for me when it comes to controller versus keyboard and whatnot. I kind of need to use my thumbs as opposed to my fingertips, if that makes sense. Like, I need to push buttons with my thumbs.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I'm like only with like first person games that I kind of have to do with a keyboard, but for everything else, I pretty much want a controller.
Yeah, even first person, I need a controller. But that said, I hardly play any first person games, and when I do, I'm pretty bad. So
yeah.
But yeah, I did want to ask, like, as far as like, I know you're working on some more projects at the moment, as far as like you mentioned earlier, FewR DVD. There's like we had to distinguish like the old version, the jam version, versus like this new version. Is that something that you're like, what are the plans with that? I know you're kind of collaborating with some more folks on that, if you're able to talk about it.
I'm not under like an NDA or anything, but I am just gonna keep it a little secret on a lot of those details. But I'm collaborating with a lot of people. I'm working with a very good artist, Human is Red, or actually I think they like just changed their username, but hopefully you can still find them with that name.
Yeah, I'll link it for sure.
I also worked with another coder who I've known for a very long time, named Ridiculoid, and we're going to have Lewmoth on the tunes. I'm hoping you might not know this, or maybe he talked about it when you interviewed him, but he started as more of like an electronic music and like EDM type stuff. I'm hoping to like get him back there.
Okay.
A little bit,
that would fit perfectly, because that game is like, even with no music, like you said, in like the game jam version, like it has this like menacing quality to it. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but there's just that, like, I don't know if it was your voice. Like, it sounds like there's a voice just going like,
it's me.
And it's just this like manipulated audio that like almost feels like it's like skipping or something. Like you almost feel like there's something like going wrong with your computer, maybe. And maybe that's partially because my laptop can't handle all the particles and stuff going on. But yeah, I'm really excited, because I think the person that you're working with as well on the, you said, what was their name again?
Which one? The artist or the other programmer?
The other programmer.
Ridiculoid? Or Nick Muse.
Nick Muse, yeah, because I know I see them on Twitter all the time, and they have a couple other games. I think they're working on another game with Jamie Nowhere, I want to say. That looks really cool.
They're working on like a top-down shooter.
Yeah, that game, like the UI and all the interfaces in that game. Everything about that game, every time I see it, I just think, oh my God, this looks so good.
Yeah, Ridiculoid's technical art skills are like off the charts, and really like always have been. So yeah, I'm very happy I got to work with them on this.
Yeah, so you seem to be getting a little bit more into collaborating. Is that something you were saying before? Like, do you prefer to just be like, hey, let me code this and let me kind of collaborate and have some ideas, but just kind of be the behind the scenes person, or do you like to kind of be at the helm, or do you have a preference, or just depends on the project?
Yeah, I guess it just depends. There's some games which I haven't posted all or talked about that are just completely by myself and probably will be, or yeah, probably Lewmoth as well. But I think working with other people like usually makes me happier, like doing a project that way. It's just a much more enjoyable experience for me usually.
Yeah, and I think it maybe lets you and not you in particular, but anybody like kind of break out of their comfort zone a little bit and just kind of push beyond their normal skill set. Just being like, hey, I don't want to let these other people down, you know. So I got to make sure I hold up my end of the bargain.
Absolutely, yeah. That's definitely how I felt with like Self and a lot of the other things I've done.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
with FewR, as far as the atmosphere. I talked about like I made it just for a jam, and I usually like try and make sure to sleep during jams, but I didn't do it for that one. I was just in a very weird mood.
Well, you just released Lianthus, and you're probably like riding a high of like, hey, I just put out another game, and like,
no,
hey.
I felt so bad. Seriously, like you'll probably hear this from a lot of people, but sometimes like, or most of the time maybe, like releasing a game just feels awful for weeks.
You know, I had our friend, you know, I think I mentioned earlier, like I play in a band with John, who's on the podcast, and then our buddy Glenn, who's also in the band. He had mentioned that like when we finished our album, our first like thing that we recorded, like it was all this like this huge exciting process of like, we're making an album. Yes. Like we're doing it. And then like we made it and it's done. And then it's just done. Like there's nothing to look forward to anymore. Like there's no like, oh, we have another mixing session with the, you know, the engineer or whatever. It's just like we're done. It's over.
Yeah, it's like a very hollow, empty feeling.
You're like, what's next? Yeah, like we played the release show and now we just exist again. Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, so like coming out of that, I made this like really like just bad, no good, awful feeling game, but that I don't know, like it gave me like a migraine to play it. But like I still really wanted to play it more.
And you're talking about FewR DVD here, or you're talking about something else? Yeah,
for FewR DVD.
That's
like,
a perfect.
And everyone I've shown it to like either just bounces off of it, hates it completely after like 2 minutes, or they just like play it until they get a headache and like feel physically bad and then they have to stop. So yeah, I'm trying to stick to those roots, I guess, for the new one, and I don't know, just maybe make something that has that unique feeling to it.
Yeah, and I gotta say that all of your games really do it, whether you're working kind of solo or with Lewmoth with the Noisy Bug stuff, but like even when you've done Fear of Gears with Blabberf and I believe that was Lewmoth as well on the tunes.
Yeah, and Noel, the guy who did all the art for Lianthus as well. He did the art for Fear of Gears and some of my other jams as well.
Fear of Gears, I remember I didn't check it out right away.
Yeah, that jam game turned out really good.
It's so good. And I like right away I remember thinking I didn't play it because I thought it was only mouse and keyboard controls, and you were like, no, we just like you have to use the mouse to pick the buffs and stuff because we couldn't figure that out in time, but otherwise you can play with a controller. And I was like, okay, I'm in. And I got really sucked into that one. Like again, like so many of these jam games these jam games that I play, they really feel like they're like, man, just like if there was just a little more time and like another layer or two, you know, or another mode or two baked into this, like this is a game right here. And that's one that really specifically felt that way. And Blabberf is another game designer who I feel like
Blabberf is like a legend,
a genius. Well. I mean, yeah, like we've talked about gun rounds on the podcast before, and I don't think I've ever had so much fun clicking a mouse in my life. Like you're just clicking a mouse, and that was one
gun
of the first.
Gun rounds is probably like the best mobile game of all time.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
I feel very lucky I got to work with Blabberf because he's got like the turn-based game design on lock.
Down to a science.
There's better people out there.
It's so engaging.
And then also Matt, like for platformers, is totally the same way. So it was great to work with both of them within like 4 months.
That's a really great point. Yeah, those two are really kind of like have each of those kind of genres, if you will, down to a science.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm totally the opposite. Like I just I don't have like a genre that I like to make. I just kind of like to make.
That's sort of what I like about your stuff. Like I never know what to expect. Like when you're working on something new, I always know like, but you know, depending on who you're working with, that might influence it. But whatever it is, it's like I don't know. It doesn't. The Dev Dwarf stamp doesn't mean anything necessarily, other than it's just like a stamp of quality. I don't mean that in a dismissive way by any means, but it's like
no,
it's very much like
sounded funny.
Yeah, when it came out of my mouth, I was like, "Oh shoot, it sounds like a diss almost." But like it really is like a. It's just like I know it's going to be good and I know it's going to be interesting, but I don't know what it's going to be like. And that's almost more exciting, you know, even though I know like I love a 2D platformer, so I'm going to love whatever Matt makes. But even when I heard he's working on like a new like an art design of like for a top down game, I was like, oh, I'm just curious to see what he does in that sphere, because I'm just so used to seeing like the side on perspective from him.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see that. He also we were kind of talking about maybe doing like another game jam sometime where I like basically just the opposite of what we did for Self. Like I'll design it.
Okay.
We'll like just do the art for me and stuff.
Okay, so
who knows if that'll happen?
Well, I was going to say, so what's the draw for that? Being that you have just said that like you're more into like the behind the scenes like programming aspect, what's the draw on your end? Like, do you get a little bit of like a rush from doing like the game jam kind of thing where it's like wait for the announcement of the theme and then kind of like you have, you know, you're kind of put on the spot a little bit. Like, is that the draw for that situation?
I don't know. I'm not very good at game design. Like all of my games like Lianthus and I mean, maybe Fewar's like the exception to that because I did just kind of come up with that in a day. But since like I made the jam version, I've been thinking about how I would make that a larger game.
Yeah.
And it took me like a year to like figure that out. So I definitely like I'm not good at designing for a jam, I would say.
Yeah.
Because I'm just a slow mover.
That's a good way to approach game design, though, to say like, hey, like there's no reason to force this. Like we were talking about before, I think before we started recording, but like I know when you're the one making the game, I'm sure it feels like there's a rush to like, we got to finish this game. We got to get it out there. But like, there's a million other games for everyone else to play. So it's kind of like, I know you want to get your game out there, but like, there's no rush. Like do it right and make sure you're happy with it before you put it out there. Cause you definitely can't go back once you've put the game out. I mean, you can patch it, I guess.
Yeah, you definitely only release once. I think that also, like, you were talking about for game jams, like, oh, if this was just, like, you know, a few days more, like, what would have it been? And I think that's, like, kind of how Self came about.
Yeah.
Because we, like, I don't know, I mean, it was all kind of there after, like, 3 days. But we were, you know, me and Matt just kind of had, like, a long talk. Because, you know, like, it was a game jam. That was, like, the time commitment both of us were expecting.
Right.
I was in the middle of a semester, like I was taking like 18 credit hours.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like we were both pretty busy, but it's like, shit, this is like the best game either of us have made. So we have to like actually just make it good.
Yeah.
As good as we can.
It very much felt that way too. It felt like both of you were just like, hey, we realize like we got to make this game. We need to follow through on this. Like it felt like a little more like, I never know what word to use, but it felt like a little more of like an official release, if you will. Like I think I used that like term with like Lianthus too. Like it was kind of like a commercial game, if you will, as opposed to like Fewar DVD or even Control Co. Which I know you both of you like. With,
they're just a bit more scrappy.
Exactly,
kind of games, but again, they still have their own merit and stuff. But
yeah, and Control Co. is a perfect example of like. You know, I know both of you. That was a Lewmoth, Noisy Bug plus Zed Squadron of Sprout fame that we mentioned before, collaboration, and that was like I think the top thing is like just the difficulty curve, and it is a hard game, but like I love that, of course, especially when it comes to arcade action. But like, you know, that's another game.
It's not for everyone.
Right. But I think that's another game where if you just like had difficulty settings and a few different, maybe like a roguelike or just a pure arcade set, like it's like this could just be a $5 $10 arcade game that I would pick up on my Switch if it just had, you know, almost everything is there. There's just a few other things needed, but it's got killer pixel art. It's got great music. It's got great like personality to it. Like that's the thing.
I'm very happy. The music that Lewmoth made, I think Lewmoth talked about this when you interviewed him, but
I
he has
grilled
this
him.
habit of like, he just waits till like the last 2 hours to do the music so that I can't like, because usually like on Lianthus, I don't know, like I always just have like little shit I kind of want changed for whatever reason. I probably like shouldn't do that, but anyway, I
it's
tend
the nature
to do that.
of things.
So for the jams, like he just like, all right, here it is, and I'm just like, shit, I got to put this in the game like really fast.
Yeah, I remember he was even saying, I think with either Control Co or Fear of Gears, but he was like, oh shoot, I don't think they use
Fear
like the
of Gears, it was mono.
files. Yeah,
well, yeah, because like Game Maker defaults to mono, which is probably my least favorite thing about Game Maker.
Yeah, it's fine for sound effects, but
that.
for music, it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, Lianthus almost released in mono as well. We caught that literally the last hour.
Yeah.
So that was fun. But Control Co, like, he came in and did the music and just, like, totally... Like, I didn't even know that the game should have that energy to it until he made that music for it. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, this is, like, how it should have been, huh?
Yeah, exactly. He has a really good knack for that, I feel. And, every time I see...
He is extremely prolific and extremely like fast to make things.
And the fact that he does it all in the box, in quotation marks, but like without having any real like musical background and just kind of doing it all within the software it's kind of mind boggling because his music really does have an organic feel to it a lot of times. I mean, not necessarily when he's not going for that. When it's going for more of the electronic feel, he can do that too. But like he can definitely nail like that. I don't know, like it's really hard to nail that, like to feel like people are playing this music when it's just all MIDI tracks, Yeah. And he really does nail that, I feel.
If you want to watch that in action, he's streaming a lot now on YouTube.
Yeah, I've been noticing him doing that. Yeah, and I really need
definitely
to check
out Lewmoth music on YouTube.
Yeah,
and have him compose for your games.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's always doing awesome stuff in games. Speaking of like that, John and I and DJ are all getting ready to play some Everhood so that we can talk about that on the podcast.
Oh, nice.
And I know Lewmoth got a track in that game.
That was actually, if you don't mind me just going on a tangent about that. We were actually,
I'd rather you talk
funny
than
looking
me.
back on it. We were developing a rhythm game that like very similar to Everhood in a way, like at the same time, like before the Everhood demo was out. So like it wasn't like a huge thing yet.
Yeah.
And we were making our own rhythm game right around that time. Some of the music from that is still like, me and Lewmoth are gonna like try and find a way to release
Figure out how to use
really
it. Really
good. But yeah, and so we were making our own rhythm game, and so we started talking to those guys a bit, and they were like, "Hey, could we have like a guest track from Lewmoth?" And like they actually just found a couple of his older songs that they really liked that they wanted to use, and I was like, it was kind of funny because like I'd also, they were some of my favorite of Lewmoth's older tracks as well.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, you guys have
You're
good
like,
taste
I guess
Lewmoth.
you can use them. I was maybe thinking about doing
I wasn't
something.
like possessive about it. No, not at all.
No, that's so cool though. And again, I love all this like indie collaboration stuff that I keep seeing. And again, it seems like you do a lot of that. Again, I kind of was coming into this conversation maybe thinking like, okay, you've got like your Dev Dwarf games, and even like, for example, with Self, I was a little bit shocked that like that was like the official Self itch.io page is on the Dev Dwarf page. It's not on the Matt page. Where like to me it felt like this is a Matt game.
I still have weird feelings about that. I think if we do a full version of Self, it should be on the Matt page. We put it on my page literally because I have more itch.io followers, and we wanted it to go big.
More people to see it. Hey, that makes total sense.
It's definitely like he had been thinking about that mechanic for so long and stuff. I don't know. I feel like I just helped him like achieve his full vision for it, which I'm very happy with.
Well, I'm going to say,
that's super happy to do it, but it's definitely like his game idea.
but at the same time, like you said, like it is you and Connor and everybody involved, like making it able to making it happen. You know, you're able
Definitely.
to say like, hey, you just work on the levels and I'll make the coding happen. I'll make these mechanics happen. I might even add some new mechanics that you hadn't thought of yet.
Well, yeah, and you were talking about like how it maybe felt like a full release, but I think like probably how it'll go is I'm gonna make another just big toy box like that, and then he'll probably spend like a long time making all the levels, and that'll be a full release. That'll be something else.
Yeah, I'm really excited because again, like ever since I had that conversation with Connor where he was like, I wish Matt would just like, he wasn't complaining or anything, but just like, I wish Matt would get into like making a longer game because I always want to make speaking of prolific people too, just like Lewmoth.
Yeah, Connor is extremely
Connor is just like, let me make
prolific
music for like 25 games at the same time and also do all these awesome like comic book sketch art pieces and like just an insanely talented person.
Connor also is just like a pro, and not in that like he like wears a suit and talks weird when you're working with him, but he is just a pro. He does like he tells you exactly when you can expect stuff to be done. He can do like anything. It all sounds amazing. Like his sound effects, I don't know, like, because I've done all the sound effects for my games in the past, and like I think I've done a good job.
Yeah,
but, like,
they're great.
It was really something else, like hearing his and just like
so he did the self sound effects.
Brought out. Yeah, he did all those.
Wow. Okay, so I was here thinking he was doing only the music stuff and nothing to do with the sound effects. That's awesome.
He did all of the sound. Amazing job on the sound.
Oh yeah, I love it.
I will say, I think I was the one that's like, we should have the music muffle when the ghost comes out.
Okay.
So I'll take credit for that.
That's an amazing effect. But even like, so Connor did the music for a game called Boba, which we've raved about on the podcast as well. And even in that game, when you go into like the bubbles or the bobas, if you will, that kind of slow down time.
They totally did the same thing.
Well, he said that they didn't. Like I asked him, I was like, did you? I was like, oh, I love that like effect. He's like, actually, we didn't do it. We tried, and it sounded weird, and like we actually just. I think he said they do something, but it's not. It doesn't do anything with the music warping, but it totally feels like it. It's like
it feels. I thought like they literally did the same thing.
That's exactly what I thought. Like it almost feels like you like go underwater or something. But it's so cool.
That game also is great.
Oh God, it's so good. Like that back to back, at least in my mind. Like it was like we did an episode of Self on the podcast, and then shortly thereafter it was like, oh, it's Boba time. And it just felt like, man, these 2D platformers are just cranking, and the level editor in Boba is just incredible. Like being able to play around with that, like it was so cool. Like I don't know. It was a very from somebody who has no coding background or anything to be able to like just build levels like you would in Mario Maker, but for a little indie game was such a cool little treat.
I'll probably release the Lianthus level editor on its anniversary, but that level editor like sucks. So,
ooh, I'm kind of curious about that because top down level editor sounds interesting. Yeah, at least just check it out. Yeah.
The reason why I say that editor sucks is like it didn't have like backups, and if the game crashed, it would just delete the whole level. So
gotcha.
I ended up making like every area in Lianthus, like because there'll be like a transition between areas.
Yeah.
Every one of those, I think I had to redo about like 3 times because I just like delete them. It was so sad. Like I'd just be up at like 2 a.m. and just delete a whole level and be like, all right.
I guess I can start that over. No wonder you stayed up for so many hours in a row.
It's rough.
Yeah. So
my next level editor will have backups for sure.
Yeah. So do you have any plans for like, if you're able to share, but any plans for like future projects coming up or things that you're working on or, things you're excited about? Just, anything just coming down the line that you're looking forward to?
Yeah. Right now, VR DVD, pouring a lot of love into that.
Yeah.
Very excited to see what people think, and hopefully I can finish that up.
And that's like you're leaning into more just kind of doing a more fleshed out version of the Game Jam game. Is that kind of what you're aiming for with that one?
I think that would be fair to say. There's also there's a story to it. It'll be like a Dev Dwarf type story. It's not very explicit, but
okay. Heck yeah.
it's important to me. So I'm hoping people can take something out of it.
Awesome.
And I'm just excited to share that. I think we've been taking a pause on Self. We tried to, like, after we released Self, just continuously keep working on it.
Yeah.
We all just got kind of sick of that for a wide variety of reasons. Last semester, like, specifically for me, I don't know, like, what necessarily happened with Matt and stuff. But last semester for me was like the worst semester of college I've ever had. So it was just really shitty, and I didn't have the time to keep working on Self.
Yeah. Hey, at least it's over, though.
Yeah, it starts again in like a month, but but I think Self will resume probably later this year.
Nice.
Absolutely no promises on when Self is going to be done, but I might share some more videos, or I might not. I might just not do it.
I love it. I love the cryptic advertising. I love it. Because
it'll be out when it's out.
Exactly. It keeps you excited.
Like
You're
that.
just like, all of a sudden you see like it pop up again, and you're like, wait a minute, there's new levels? What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a fun way to do it. It's definitely not good for like your Twitter follower count or anything, but I don't know. I've just like, I don't care about that as much anymore. I tried to like maximize that last year, and I think I'm just done with that now.
Yeah, I think you just gotta go with the flow. If they come, they come. If they don't, they don't. And whatever happens, happens. You know, you can't force the masses to do anything.
Then also along the same lines of something I've been taking a pause on, there will be a sequel to Lianthus.
Yes. I didn't want to ask because I wasn't sure, but I know you posted some stuff a long while back. At least it feels like a long while back, but some really cool, like kind of rotating and again, using that sprite stacking technique, like really cool visuals for sure, as always.
Yeah. I took a pause on that. I'm probably going to like restart that project because I wasn't happy with the code. But as soon as I'm happier with it, it'll probably come out. I don't know. It'll probably be like a similar length to Lianthus maybe, but maybe a bit longer than that.
Okay.
And just hopefully a bit more polished. We'll see.
Nice. And are you
Other than that, there's a few like Lewmoth special game ideas that will probably be made over like the next year or so, but
okay, because I'm excited to see some more Noisy Bug productions. That is for sure. Because again, that's how I stumbled across your guys' stuff. So
yeah,
but I don't know. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up the chat tonight here?
Yeah, I'm just gonna plug everyone I've ever worked with.
Do it.
We can call it a day.
Do it.
Unfollow Dwarf on Twitter because I don't post, and I'm not going to anymore. Go instead follow Nolnad on Twitter. Great pixel art. Follow Clovelt on Twitter, who did the trailer for Lianthus, and also Gutwell, and also Sprout.
Oh,
and
wow!
It's just an amazing, amazing at that, and also just at game design. He has some good games as well. Go also follow Zed Squadron, who made Sprout. Go follow Blabberf, who made Gun Rounds, and is also working on a dungeon crawling dating sim right now. Which is very, very good looking.
Yeah, and anything they do is just already has my interest, but that sounds super appealing. That sounds really interesting.
Who else do we got? Go follow Ridiculoid or Nick Muse. Just really, really impressive games.
Yeah, they work with, if I'm not mistaken, they work with FaxDoc a lot. Does that ring a bell?
I think FaxDoc is pretty solo most of the time, but they work with Jamie Nowhere.
That's who I'm thinking of. That's who I was thinking of, yeah.
Go follow both of those two people as well while you're at it.
Great games all around.
Cultist
Cultist, that's how you say it. I always say Cultisti, but Cultist.
I always say Cultist. I don't know which one's right.
I've never been corrected, so I. But I had Lianthus right. I'm pretty happy about that. Even Lewmoth wasn't 100% sure. He was like, I always say Lianthus. I was like, nah, that doesn't feel right to me, man.
He's got it wrong, but that's okay.
I thought so. Even when he said it, I was like, I'm going to keep saying Lianthus. That just feels more right to me.
Yeah, but go follow Lewmoth. He's probably one of the better indie game composers out there right now,
and making music for so many games.
Shows great promise.
Yeah. And well, I'll definitely make sure to link to his, especially his YouTube, since he's been doing more of that streaming, live composing and stuff. I'll definitely make sure to link to that in the episode description too.
Definitely. And then, of course, go follow Connor Grail as well. He's like probably the other just powerhouse game composer right now.
Yeah.
If you've played a game on Newgrounds in like the last 3 months, he probably did the music.
That's no joke.
And if you don't think so, you're probably wrong.
You're totally right. He does so many games. It's crazy.
Matt Ugg will just make you completely rethink the platformer genre.
Yep.
Even if you don't like it that much, you'll probably start liking it.
I agree. Although I do love
who else? Oh man, I've just got to plug everyone I know. The artist for FUR DVD actually has a twin brother, and they make games together. They're Frogrammer and Human is Red.
Oh, nice.
They're gonna be very, very good to keep your eyes on in the future, I think.
We've talked about a couple of Frogrammer's games, or at least Hinoken for sure. We talked about on the podcast, which the two of them worked on together. But yeah, everything, and yeah, Human is Red. And again, I know you mentioned that they just changed their name to I know it's HIS. I don't know what it stands for.
Yeah, I think it's just HIS now.
Yeah. But I
asked them about it. I don't think it stands for anything.
Yeah,
that's okay.
They were I'll still respond to Human is Red, and it's actually TinyBox11 on Twitter, so to make it extra confusing. But yeah, when they made Underneath with Cultisti or Cultisti, if to say it properly, I can't wait to see everything. And the kid's 15 years old. Just blows my mind, man. These people are so talented. It's crazy.
Definitely.
But
yeah, so just go follow all those people. I don't know, indie game development, it's just a bunch of individual people. So even though the games turn out in the end, if you message one of these people on Twitter and say, hey, I like the game, you'll probably make their day. So
I can vouch for that, because anytime that we get a random email that's hey, thanks for the podcast, or thanks for the videos, or comment, it really does make your day. You're hey, somebody else found this cool game because I made this YouTube video. It's it's the smallest little thing, but it does mean a lot to people. So I'm glad to hear that it feels that way on your end too, because I do see a lot of comments sometimes where it's man, could this be annoying? I don't know, but I think for the most part, anybody wants to get a little feedback on the thing that they put out into the world.
Definitely. I don't usually respond, but I have read every comment on every one of my games, probably to an unhealthy amount. I also read every comment on every YouTube video of all of my games.
Yep. I know the feeling. All too well. But yeah, I think we can probably leave the conversation there for now, although we'll definitely be keeping an eye on pretty much everything Dev Dwarf does in the future, whether he's collaborating with anyone else or not. Because, we love your games. I don't know what else to say. So I just want to say thanks again for joining us for 2 weeks in a row and chatting some games and, letting us crank out a couple episodes of the podcast with having your company grace us. So yeah, thanks again, Dev Dwarf, for joining us. And until next week, we can catch you then.
Thank you. It was fun.
When I look back, I'm man, maybe I should take these down.
Same thing with the games, man. I'm right there with you.
Yep. Okay, at least I think that's just the nature of any creative process. Yeah, our, any previous, our old songs in the band, you're we're not playing those at shows anymore. We just got to play the new songs, guys. So, yeah.
I think we should jump in before we need another clap, or maybe we need another clap.
No, we're good.